Okay, so yeah, if we could talk a bit about changing places. And if you tell that story again, that would be wonderful because I also explained to you. Um, in the ACT, we've only just recently got our very first changing place.
It's on my list of places to visit.
Yeah, well, what's appalling is that it took this long to get one.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, there's no plans for others. So I've been on a campaign for advocacy for getting more changing places. But as you know, they're quite expensive to retrofit. But how do we get it in the government policy that all new facilities have them inbuilt? I mean, they're building an accessible bathroom anyway. It doesn't take much to have the specifications so that you can put your hoist in. But I'll let you tell a bit about the background to your experience with changing places.
Yeah, well, when my son was in high school, the school asked me if I would meet with another mother in the support unit because they were doing a bucket list trip basically to the US. The mum had terminal cancer. The son was a teenager with a disability and had continental incontinence. And we met just basically to talk about travel and how they would manage to do different things when they travelled. And at the time, she wanted to know how she could change her son. And I didn't understand what she meant at the time and feel very ignorant that I didn't understand what she meant at the time. But she explained to me how they regularly had to change her son on the floor of bathrooms because there were no facilities to change him in a dignified manner. And at that time, changing places wasn't really big in Australia in general. And I was horrified, and it just really left me desperate to find some solution for her. And I was thinking of all different ways, but basically anything that I came up with to raise him off the floor, still only raise him up a small portion off the floor. And, you know, as parents, they were, you know, risking back injuries and all sorts of things, lifting a teenage boy off the floor. I hear about people who they've specifically bought vehicles that they could put curtains in the rear of the vehicle so they could change their, you know, teenage, adult, child when they're out and about because of the lack of facilities. And I think, you know, of all the things that really bothers me the most, it's the fact that so many harbour cruises, so many domestic flights, flights in general really don't have facilities, and that it just seems like the most basic human need. If people...
Yeah, every airport, every shopping centre.
Yes.
You know, every hospital.
Exactly.
Should have a changing place in them.
So many people are ducking back to their hotel because they need a hoist or they need a, you know, adult-sized change somewhere to change a person. And you can imagine how that impacts on your travel. It's already expensive to travel, but if you're having to duck back to your accommodation, you're losing valuable time where you could actually be out sightseeing and just going to a bathroom like everyone else.
Or, you know, people who don't even go to outings because they can't get to an accessible...
Well, that's right. So many people don't go on outings, or people are really risking their health on flights by not drinking, not eating, you know, doing all those things to avoid having to go to like on the aircraft to the toilet.
Yeah, but that's even a bigger issue, which we could get. Because, for instance, I'm lucky at the moment with my main carer who can lift me up, and I really struggle to imagine how we would get adult change facility on a toilet. I mean, I think most adults struggle to fit in the airplane toilet.
Oh, well, that's right.
But I'm able to use a regular toilet, but airplane toilets are very, very difficult for me. And some of the newer planes have double bathrooms that they can actually remove the doors between the two, so there can be room for a carer. But in most cases, I'm timing my meals and my drinks and my bathroom stops, and the last thing I do before I board a flight is go to the inaccessible toilet.
Yes.
And the first thing I do when I get off one is find one.
That's right.
So,
But I think the thing is that there are certain things in society that people don't want to address. Yeah. And it's I think now people are sharing a lot more on social media within their own communities. So I've heard of people, and I actually did a blog on it on How Wheelchair Will Travel about how to go on the go when you're on the go. And it was really a case of people shared the fact that they were using like bottles, men were using bottles under a blanket at night on the flight because they didn't have the capacity to use the airline bathroom. Who wants to hear that? Nobody wants to actually hear that. But if we can solve the problem, then it doesn't need to even be an issue anymore. But we have to hear it to actually know it's an issue.
Yeah, and the changing places, it's again a case where it's out of sight, out of mind. But it would be, if it was part of building codes, it would be so much easier for so many different people. And, these are hidden numbers, and until I did quite a bit of research trying to get these numbers, and, it's not recorded. Like when you record whether or not you have a disability, and that is very often thought to be underreported. But there are no questions on the Bureau of Statistics or anything about, do you need an adult change facility?
Yes.
And I think the policymakers would be shocked to know how many different people are. Because again, as you say, people don't think about it. They don't talk about it.
No.
And
well, I often have people privately messaging me, like a partner of somebody, because they can't tell anyone else of their concern about travelling somewhere and how do they get, catheter supplies when they're travelling in another country, and how do they do things because they can't tell family or
more
friends.
Specifically, how do you get through security with a whole bunch of catheter supplies?
Yeah, that's right.
I've had that problem. The issue is also the idea that it's not everybody who uses a wheelchair who needs these facilities.
That's right, exactly.
But it's also a lot of people who don't use wheelchairs. In fact, people who look fully able-bodied. I mean, if you talk about people with colostomy bags, if you talk about, in fact, even people who wouldn't be considered disabled, but women who have continence issues due to childbirth. And nobody talks about it, but
we had a lady, we were waiting outside a bathroom in Green Island with our son. There was only one accessible bathroom. She was in there for a very long time. She came out and she said, I'm very, very sorry that you had to wait so long, but I have a colostomy bag and I really need the facility. And she obviously felt that she needed to explain why she'd been in there. But she would come under the category of a hidden disability. So, and it's sad that, I guess that at the time there was only one accessible bathroom, so she felt she had to explain it. But as you say, there's many people who need the facilities of an accessible bathroom for different reasons.
And you would never guess.
No. And many wouldn't really want to discuss it. As if the facilities were provided, you wouldn't have to have those uncomfortable discussions. But without the uncomfortable discussions, we probably won't get the change.
Yeah. And I guess that then brings us to another subject, which is parking. And disabled parking. And again, the same thing. I first got my disability parking permit when I appeared quite able-bodied, but couldn't walk more than 10-15 meters before I got very tired and couldn't go on.
Yes.
And this was before I was using my walker. And obviously I've since progressed in my disability and now use a wheelchair full-time.
Yeah.
But the stories that you say about the woman apologizing for using the accessible bathroom, I've had that situation, and it's based because of the number of times I would get abused because people would say, don't park in the disabled spot, you don't need it.
Yes.
And
there's a lot of judgment regarding the accessible parking, and I'm sure there's one side of the community that are very willing to line up for accessible parking permits when perhaps they don't need one. And I will say that in the city, it's amazing how many parking spots are often taken early in the morning, the accessible parking spots, and you see people coming back. But who am I to judge who doesn't need the parking permit? But I think, it's a really tricky one. Certainly for us, we need the space. I don't care. It doesn't need to be right at the shopping centre door for me. that should be reserved for people who can't walk very far. For me, it's having the width to be able to actually open the door of the car, put the wheelchair beside, and transfer grade. And I once heard a story of a couple who were both wheelchair users, and they basically said if they got to the shopping centre and there wasn't an accessible parking spot, they just had to turn away and go home again, because it was necessary. It wasn't a luxury. It was nothing else. In an ideal world, I think it would be nice to have staggered parking. I think it would be too hard to actually implement, but to have, the parking for the people who can't walk very far, parking for people who actually need the wheelchair accessible wide spots or van spots and things like that, that would be ideal.
Yeah, and again, it's not one size fits all,
No.
and that's one of the biggest issues that we have with the accessibility tab on a lot of, say, hotel booking sites. Well, it doesn't mean anything to most people with disability, because every disability is different, and what you actually need is the information about all different types of features that are in a business or a venue, that give the information about whether or not something is accessible to the individual who wants to use it.
That's right. Yeah, because we don't actually. We're staying in a property at the moment. We haven't taken Braden's wheelchair inside the house. Now, most people would probably see him in a wheelchair and assume that we needed a fully wheelchair accessible house, but we chose it because it was big. There was lots of room for him to roam when he was in the house. There was a bath, which he likes a bath rather than a shower. Again, going against the stereotypical idea of what somebody with a disability would require. So definitely no one size fits all approach.
We've been talking for quite
We
some
have
time.
indeed.
I should let you get back to your family, so thank you very much for your time.
Absolute pleasure.
And always lovely to speak with you, and so great to have this opportunity to speak with you in person.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, great.
Thanks.